Busan, South Korea. The autumn air carries both anticipation and unease. Cameras crowd the terminal of the APEC summit venue as two leaders emerge from opposite corridors. US President Donald Trump and China's President Xi Jinping shake hands under a backdrop of South Korean and Chinese flags, a moment as symbolic as it is fragile. Their encounter, brief yet heavily choreographed, marks the highest-level contact between Washington and Beijing since the renewed trade standoff and escalating security frictions in the Pacific. For the world's two largest economies, every gesture counts. A smile suggests stability, a pause implies pressure. Within hours, the Chinese Foreign Ministry steps before reporters in Beijing to frame the story in its own voice. Its message, cautious optimism wrapped in strategic discipline. The People's Republic of China is willing to work with the United States to promote positive outcomes, spokesperson Jiakun declares. Behind those carefully chosen words lies a complex balance of diplomacy, economics and power politics that defines this moment in the US-China rivalry. The Busan meeting did not emerge in isolation. It comes after months of economic sparring and tit-for-tat policy moves. Washington has accused Beijing of manipulating rare earth exports, the minerals vital to everything from electric vehicles to missiles, while China has condemned what it calls America's unilateral bullying through tariffs and technology bans. At stake is far more than trade. It is the architecture of the 21st century world economy. Which country sets standards in artificial intelligence, semiconductors and clean energy technologies? Since Trump returned to office, he has pushed for fair reciprocity, reviving tariff measures that many thought buried after 2019. China responded with export curbs on gallium and graphite, metals crucial to US industry. For both leaders, Busan is as much about domestic politics as foreign policy. Trump faces pressure from US farmers and manufacturers hurt by supply chain shocks. Xi faces a sluggish post-pandemic economy and rising youth unemployment. The handshake, therefore, serves as a mutual pause button, a chance to cool tensions without surrendering face. Diplomats from both sides had been quietly preparing for weeks. According to Reuters, negotiators met in Kuala Lumpur and Singapore to outline a possible mini-deal covering three issues: rare earth exports, US soybean purchases, and a joint mechanism on fentanyl precursors flowing from Chinese factories to American streets. The stakes were clear. The US had threatened to impose 100% tariffs on all Chinese imports starting November 1st. China had hinted at tightening its export licensing rules for critical minerals, a move that could cripple the US electronics sector. Regional players watched nervously. South Korea feared being trapped between two superpowers whose trade war could undermine its own tech exports. Japan and ASEAN nations urged stability in statements ahead of the summit. Financial markets swung on every rumor of progress or delay. In this climate, the Busan encounter was framed as a high-risk gamble with potential global relief. Trump arrived insisting that China must play fair, while Xi's delegation spoke of dialogue based on mutual respect. The two leaders knew they would not resolve their differences in one meeting, but they could stop a crisis from spiraling. When the doors closed in Busan's conference hall, US officials briefed reporters on what they called a constructive exchange. Trump told the press that China had agreed to delay its rare earth export restrictions for 1 year and resume large-scale soybean purchases from American farmers. He also claimed Beijing would expand cooperation on countering synthetic drug trafficking, especially fentanyl precursors. In Trump's words, an amazing meeting. He announced that the 100% tariff threat would be suspended, calling the agreement a win for our workers and for peace. Markets reacted with guarded optimism. The Dow Jones rose 2% overnight. Asian stocks followed. Yet analysts noted that none of the announced measures had been formally signed. The phrase tactical truce began circulating in media rooms from New York to Hong Kong. For the United States, the optics were powerful. Trump could claim to have secured economic concessions without reversing his America First narrative. For China, the picture was less clear, and that is precisely how Beijing wanted it. Hours after Trump's statements, Beijing's Ministry of Foreign Affairs convened its own press conference. Spokesman Jiakun appeared calm and precise, reading from a prepared sheet. He acknowledged that the two leaders had a frank and in-depth exchange and that China welcomes positive momentum in bilateral dialogue. But when reporters pressed for details, did China really agree to delay rare earth controls? Were soybean purchases resuming immediately? Guo demurred. Both sides reached a preliminary consensus on several matters of mutual concern, he said. The specific details will be handled through working-level consultations. That carefully worded non-confirmation spoke volumes. Beijing was signaling cooperation without ceding narrative control. Chinese state media echoed the MFA's tone, describing the talks as constructive but avoiding any mention of concessions. Foreign Minister Wang Yi summed up the official line the next day. No country should fantasize that it can suppress China and maintain good relations with China at the same time. His message was clear. Beijing will engage, but on its own terms. China's cautious response reflects a broader foreign policy philosophy. In Beijing's view, publicly confirming concessions, especially under US pressure, risks domestic backlash and undermines its image of strategic strength. By keeping agreements ambiguous, China preserves flexibility. Domestically, Xi Jinping must project confidence amid economic headwinds. Acknowledging concessions to Trump could be perceived as weakness in front of nationalist audiences and party cadres. Internationally, China wants to appear as the responsible actor, calm, measured, and unprovoked. This dual messaging strategy, firm rhetoric at home, conciliatory language abroad, is a hallmark of Beijing's modern diplomacy. It allows China to signal cooperation to markets and partners while assuring its citizens that it has not bowed to foreign pressure. As a senior analyst at Tsinghua University told the South China Morning Post, China's message is that it wants dialogue, not dictation. The Busan summit, from Beijing's perspective, was less about solving problems than about managing them, reducing immediate risks while keeping long-term leverage. Analysts call this moment a tactical truce. The tariff pause and trade assurances buy time for both governments, but none of the structural drivers of US-China rivalry have disappeared. Washington continues to restrict China's access to advanced semiconductors and AI tools. Beijing continues to invest heavily in self-reliance and military modernization. Economically, China still controls more than 90% of global rare earth processing, a powerful bargaining chip. Politically, neither Trump nor Xi can afford to look soft. For that reason, experts warn any peace achieved in Busan could be short-lived. The meeting reduced the temperature but did not change the climate, notes a Reuters column on October 30th. Both sides have chosen risk management over resolution. Despite the smiles and handshakes, major fault lines remain. The US export ban on high-end chips remains in place. China's military maneuvers around Taiwan continue. Beijing's cyber regulations still worry American tech firms. Moreover, both sides face domestic pressures that could derail any fragile understanding. If US farm exports fail to materialize quickly, Trump could reignite tariffs. If China's growth continues to slow, Beijing might blame US containment policies to rally public support. The real test will come in implementation. Without signed protocols or verification mechanisms, each side can interpret the Busan talks to its advantage until the next flashpoint. For South Korea, the host, the meeting was a diplomatic balancing act. President Yoon Suk-yeol praised the dialogue, but warned that competition must not erode stability. Japan welcomed the temporary calm, but vowed to strengthen supply chain resilience. ASEAN states saw a chance to push regional trade without picking sides. Global markets breathed a sigh of relief, but it was the quiet of a ceasefire, not a peace treaty. As the foreign ministry's lights dimmed in Beijing that evening, one question lingered. How long can this fragile pause hold before the world's two economic giants collide again? When word of the Busan truce spread, financial markets across Asia responded almost instantly. The Shanghai Composite Index gained 2%, Seoul's Kospi rebounded after a volatile week, and soybean futures in Chicago surged on expectations of renewed Chinese demand. But beyond market optimism lay deeper uncertainty. For Washington, the short-term easing of tariffs offered breathing room to US manufacturers. For Beijing, delaying export controls prevented a potential shock to its own industries that rely on Western buyers of rare earth-based technologies. In Seoul and Tokyo, the mood was cautious. South Korea's government welcomed the calm but quietly warned allies that strategic competition will continue under new labels. Japan's Trade Minister Ken Saito told reporters that Tokyo would accelerate stockpiling of rare earths and strengthen supply chains to avoid future hostage situations. Meanwhile, Southeast Asia viewed the summit as an opportunity. Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia hope to attract manufacturing fleeing US-China friction. The ASEAN bloc, through its 2025 communiqué, called Busan a step toward restabilizing global trade flows, while reminding both powers of shared responsibility in maintaining open regional markets. In Europe, leaders expressed cautious satisfaction. Brussels issued a statement that constructive dialogue is preferable to confrontation, but analysts at the European Policy Centre warned that the truce might simply reset the countdown to the next crisis. Behind China's muted public tone lies a calculated diplomatic playbook. According to foreign policy experts, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs functions as both messenger and shield, projecting calm externally while insulating domestic politics from appearing concessional. By letting Trump's side speak first and louder, Beijing gauged global reactions before clarifying its own stance. State outlets such as Xinhua and Global Times ran stories emphasizing mutual respect and dialogue among equals, avoiding any phrase that might suggest China agreed to US terms. This method serves three purposes. First, it buys time. Beijing can study domestic economic effects before implementing any deal. Second, it allows China to test how Washington's promises hold up under domestic scrutiny. And third, it portrays Beijing as the steadier hand amid US political turbulence. Diplomatic scholars describe the approach as strategic ambiguity, a tool China often deploys in sensitive negotiations. The same tactic was evident in the 2019 Phase 1 trade deal and in maritime dialogues with ASEAN. It signals flexibility without conceding sovereignty. At the same time, Foreign Minister Wang Yi's language about no country suppressing China while seeking friendship reminds Washington that engagement has limits. In Beijing's hierarchy of diplomacy, cooperation is conditional. Economic pragmatism may coexist with strategic defiance. Economically, China's room for maneuver is narrower than in the last major trade confrontation. Growth has slowed below 5%, property markets remain fragile, and youth unemployment lingers in double digits. Amid these pressures, Xi Jinping's government is eager to stabilize foreign investment inflows, which fell 14% year-on-year. Hence, a visible easing of US trade friction helps restore investor confidence. Even without formal documents, markets interpret the MFA's calm tone as tacit assurance that no immediate escalation is coming. It is a signaling mechanism, diplomacy as macroeconomic management. For the US, the calculus is similarly domestic. The Trump administration needs relief for its manufacturing and farm constituencies before the 2026 midterms. Soybean sales to China had plunged 60% during the tariff cycle. Even partial resumption provides a political talking point. That is why Trump emphasized agriculture and American workers in his Busan remarks. Yet both economies remain locked in structural rivalry. Washington's National Critical Materials Act aims to cut reliance on Chinese rare earths by 2030, while Beijing's Made in China 2025 agenda continues to seek semiconductor self-sufficiency. Busan did not alter these trajectories. It merely adjusted their tempo. Beyond trade, one topic drew unexpected alignment: fentanyl. Trump linked tariff relief to cooperation on curbing Chinese chemical exports used to make synthetic opioids. US authorities blame precursor flows from China for fueling the overdose epidemic that kills tens of thousands annually. Beijing's official response was measured. Jiakun confirmed continued law enforcement communication, but stressed that the root cause lies in US domestic demand. China insists it already bans most fentanyl analogues and argues that cooperation should be non-politicized. Nevertheless, the agreement to revive a suspended anti-narcotics working group marks the first functional collaboration between the two sides in over a year. Analysts view it as a small but symbolically vital trust-building gesture. In geopolitical terms, it demonstrates that limited cooperation is still possible, even amid systemic rivalry. A glimpse of pragmatic coexistence. How the story is told matters as much as the substance. Within hours of the Busan handshake, American and Chinese news cycles diverged sharply. CNN and the Wall Street Journal framed it as a rare breakthrough achieved through Trump's hardline approach. Chinese outlets described it as proof that dialogue and mutual respect are the only correct paths. This information asymmetry is deliberate. Each government tailors its narrative to domestic audiences. In Washington, the focus is strength. In Beijing, stability. For observers, it creates an echo chamber in which both publics believe their side prevailed. Chinese state media also amplified the image of foreign ministry professionalism, diplomats taking questions calmly, the national flag behind them, the message disciplined and unwavering. It reinforced Beijing's self-portrait as a responsible global actor, contrasting it with what it portrays as US unpredictability. In the digital realm, hashtags on Weibo and X and Busan meeting and Xi-Trump summit trended for 24 hours, generating millions of views before authorities moderated debate. Comments praising China's calm wisdom were highlighted. Those questioning the summit's benefits quickly disappeared. This tight narrative management ensures the party, not the press, defines success. Despite the temporary calm, analysts caution that structural rivalry could return quickly. Several flashpoints loom. Technology controls. The US export ban on high-end chips remains, limiting Chinese AI development. Beijing has pledged to respond with its own tech investment fund exceeding $40 billion. Taiwan tensions. While absent from the Busan communique, Taiwan's status remains a red line. Any increase in US arms sales or Taiwanese diplomacy could reignite confrontation. Rare earth policy. If China's National Development and Reform Commission reimposes licensing before 2026, Washington may view it as breach of faith. Domestic politics. Trump's re-election narrative depends on tough but successful deal-making. Any sign of backtracking from Beijing could invite retaliatory tariffs. Geopolitically, the Indo-Pacific remains militarized. US carrier groups patrol near Taiwan. China expands its navy at record pace. As one defense analyst put it, economic truce does not equal strategic trust. In Seoul, the summit boosted the government's image as a neutral facilitator. President Yoon's office described the event as proof that dialogue on Korean soil can bridge global divides. Yet critics note that South Korea still faces US pressure to limit tech exports to China while relying on Chinese consumers. Tokyo's Chief Cabinet Secretary Hirokazu Matsuno struck a pragmatic tone. Any easing of tension is welcome, but Japan's strategy is diversification, not dependence. The Philippines' Foreign Secretary called the Busan outcome a welcome pause, but warned against assuming superpower consensus equals regional peace. Even Moscow weighed in, framing the truce as validation of its own multipolar world thesis that Washington cannot isolate China indefinitely. Russian state TV emphasized Xi's calm demeanor compared to Trump's volatility, reinforcing Kremlin narratives about Western instability. Beyond tactical moves, Beijing's ultimate objective remains the same: to establish itself as an equal, not subordinate pole in global governance. The Busan meeting fits into this long-term vision, China as the indispensable negotiator rather than the isolated challenger. At home, propaganda organs highlighted Xi Jinping's steady leadership in a turbulent world. Abroad, envoys reassured developing countries that China's rise remains peaceful and cooperative. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs leverages such moments to showcase professionalism, restraint over rhetoric, patience over provocation. This posture serves multiple audiences: investors seeking stability, allies gauging reliability, and domestic citizens seeking reassurance. By contrast, Washington's frequent leadership changes give Beijing an opportunity to claim continuity, a subtle but effective soft power play. Analysts from Brookings Institution and Tsinghua University agree that China's current foreign policy model blends assertive realism with calculated diplomacy. The MFA's performance after Busan, measured tone, controlled leaks, and emphasis on mutual respect epitomizes this strategy. Inside the US, reactions were mixed. Republican lawmakers praised Trump for bringing Beijing to the table, while Democrats warned of empty promises. Business lobbies urged swift follow-through to secure export orders. US Trade Representative Greer told Reuters that working-level teams would verify progress within 60 days. The Pentagon, however, maintained its caution. In an internal memo leaked to AP, defense planners warned that economic calm should not obscure strategic competition. Military exercises in the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait continue unabated. Trump himself capitalized on the moment, posting on X, "Great meeting with President Xi, big progress for America and peace." The White House released staged photos of the handshake, echoing campaign trail optics from his 2018 encounter in Buenos Aires. Critics accused him of using foreign policy as political theatre. Supporters called it real-time deal-making. Several timelines will determine whether Busan marks a turning point or a pause. China's Ministry of Commerce will decide within weeks whether to delay rare earth licensing reforms. The US Congress debates a new Strategic Supply Chain Resilience Act that could redefine industrial policy. Both sides plan technical talks on fentanyl cooperation in Bangkok in December. If implemented smoothly, a follow-up leaders' call is expected in early 2026. Each of these milestones carries its own political risks. A breakdown in one area, say enforcement of chemical controls or re-emergence of export bans, could quickly undo the goodwill built in Busan. The truce is real but fragile. As night fell over Beijing after the press conference, the city's skyline glowed in soft autumn light. For a moment, the tone of global politics seemed less confrontational, but beneath the surface, the competition that defines our era continues between two systems, two visions, and two leaders whose personalities mirror their nations, ambitious, uncompromising, and deeply aware of history. China's foreign ministry achieved what it wanted, to appear measured, responsible, and in control of its narrative. Trump achieved his own goal, a headline that reads, "America wins." Between those lines lies the truth of modern diplomacy, where optics and substance blur, and where each summit buys time but rarely peace. The Busan handshake did not end the US-China rivalry. It merely reframed it as a contest in endurance and narrative control. And as both nations return to their capitals, one thing is certain: the world will be watching the next press briefing and how each side chooses to tell its story.